Good evening. We'll be holding a small talk about the domestic intelligence agencies, particularly the NSA and CIA, monitoring a Al-Qaeda communications hub in Yemen, in which they learned about an important high-ranking terrorist meeting in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The contents of this meeting would entail terrorist incidents such as the USS Cole bombing and the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. This would insinuate that intelligence services such as the CIA and maybe even the NSA had foreknowledge of these attacks. Although it's not proven, there is no evidence to suggest that they had foreknowledge, but I could probably make a very strong argument that whatever was spoken on the telephone at this Al-Qaeda communications hub located in Sana'a, Yemen, where a central figure to the 9/11 attacks, Khalid al-Mihdhar, had lived, I could probably make a great argument that the attacks were talked about on that phone. And in terms of how important it is to speak about intelligence, because this is the essence of all intelligence agencies, is information, collecting information, because information is power. Before the events can even take place, you can manipulate an event to make sure that it's successful. Now, the follow-up question is to why? Well, when you're dealing with government personnel from the federal and foreign levels, and we're talking about geostrategy and geopolitics involving important countries in the Middle East, such as Israel, Saudi Arabia, who have major influence inside the United States federal government. And need I remind you that the foreign policy guidelines of Israel, of Saudi Arabia, are the major reason why these terrorist incidents need to be successful in order to fulfill these foreign policy guidelines, such as the Oded Yanan Plan, the Paul Wolfowitz Doctrine, and the Project for New American Century, as well as the benefits to the private military industrialists, such as LG3 Technologies, Raytheon, Boeing, Blackwater, and Halliburton. Trillions of dollars are at stake, as well as reformatting the civil liberties of not just American people, but to people around the world, which gave wide influence to signals intelligence agencies of Great Britain, Australia, Switzerland, and of course the United States, which is also known as the Five Eyes. Incidentally, the terrorist incidents are not manufactured generally by these intelligence services. What I'm implying is that these terrorists indeed make these operations, but however, those involved with these incidents are known to the intelligence agencies, where information is collected and disseminated, if they are shared at all, by the way, to other agencies who may have a different agenda. So tonight's talk, I'm going to be talking about the CIA, the NSA, and an important meeting in Malaysia. Now, in terms of how long the NSA had been listening to bin Laden's satellite phone and to this house in Yemen, when it comes to bin Laden, who had moved to the Sudan in 1992, we know through the public record that at least by 1992, we have been monitoring bin Laden. Now, it is not revealed when U.S. intelligence began monitoring bin Laden exactly, though the CIA was tailing him in the Sudan by 1992. However, just to give you a general description of how much information the CIA had on bin Laden, in late 1995, the FBI, who just heard about Osama bin Laden, was given 40 thick files on bin Laden from the CIA and the NSA, which are mostly communications intercepts. The sheer amount of this material suggests that surveillance had been going on for several years. And Dan Coleman, who is an FBI agent out of the New York Counterterrorism Unit, who had been working alongside with the CIA's bin Laden unit, had begun examining those files and finds that many of them are transcripts from wiretap phones tied to bin Laden's businesses in Khartoum, Sudan, where bin Laden had lived. Now, the CIA Director, George Tenet, will later comment, and I'll take a quote, "The then obscure name Osama bin Laden kept cropping up in the intelligence traffic," end quote. And the London Times will later report that while bin Laden had lived in Sudan, he began using an $80,000 satellite phone, and other Al-Qaeda members used radios to avoid being bugged. But bin Laden was mistaken in his belief that satellite phones can't be monitored. The satellite phones that bin Laden had used were decrypted phones where the NSA can listen to every single phone call that is incoming and outgoing. Just to give you an example of how much information the NSA, particularly them, had on bin Laden, as well as the CIA, who was running human intelligence. By the way, none of this prior to the meeting, throughout those years in the early 90s, had not been shared with the FBI or the State Department. Now, on December 29th, the NSA, who were monitoring an Al-Qaeda communications hub in Sana'a, Yemen, where Khalid al-Badr had lived, the NSA had intercepted a phone call between an individual by the name of Khalid, who would later be known as Tawfiq bin Attash, and Khalid al-Badr and Nawaf al-Hazmi. The NSA had intercepted communications among 3 Arabic men throughout the days of December 28th to 29th, and the names are Khalid al-Badr, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Salim al-Hazmi, the brother of Nawaf. When the NSA was listening to the phone call between Khalid bin Attash and Khalid al-Badr, Attash had mentioned Khalid al-Badr's full name, as well as the first names of Nawaf al-Hazmi and Salim al-Hazmi. Now, this would make the NSA the first agency in the world to know the names of 9/11 hijackers. Khalid had told Khalid al-Badr that he wanted the 3 of them to come to an important summit in Malaysia on January 5th of 2000. Now, apparently, U.S. intelligence does not know Tawfiq bin Attash's full name or his role in Al-Qaeda, and they won't know until late 2000, December of 2000, which means that the NSA had sat on this information for 11 months. At the same time, U.S. officials in Pakistan intercept Nawaf al-Hazmi in Karachi, calling Khalid al-Badr at the Yemen hub. They learned that Nawaf is planning a trip to Malaysia on January 4th. The NSA is also monitoring Nawaf al-Hazmi's cell phone, who is calling his brother Salim. The NSA will share details of these calls with the CIA on December 29, 1999, in the hopes that the CIA will take photographs of the people attending this meeting. Incidentally, the CIA does not share this information with the NSA. And already what you could see, the problem is that the agencies themselves are not cooperating with each other, holding back pertinent information from one another. There's this conspiracy regarding that the United States government, as well as the intelligence services, are all acting in accordance with one another to either manufacture an event or to allow an event to happen. This is not necessarily the case here, because it's the opposite when it comes to September 11, 2001, and other terrorist events like the 1998 East Africa bombings and the USS Cole bombing, where you have information that wasn't shared with other agencies, which probably could have stopped these incidents from even happening, or at least hindered the operations. On December 31st, 1999, Khalid bin Attash had cased 4 flights to acquire basic information about how a hijacking could be conducted. Starting from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, he flies to Bangkok and then on to Hong Kong before returning to Malaysia via Bangkok. This is all for the public record, as the FBI had detailed information regarding Khalid, as they only know him by that nickname. Now, take this with a grain of salt, because Tawfiq bin Attash has been tortured by the CIA. He would later tell a CIA interrogator that he took a box cutter onto the plane, but that security did not notice. While in Malaysia, he and fellow operative Abu Bakr al-Tazizi initially stayed with a Jemaah Islamiyah leader, Ridwan Isamuddin, who goes by the nom de guerre Hambali, at the Endonite clinic, where Khalid receives a new prosthesis for his left leg. Presumably, Khalid shares what he learned at the Al-Qaeda summit meeting in Malaysia, which is attended by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ridwan Isamuddin, and others. And I'll get to that in just a minute. Now, the CIA becomes aware that Khalid al-Mihdhar is staying at a highly monitored communications hub in which they're planning to go to a meeting in Malaysia. The CIA closely watches as he leaves the hub, in which the CIA now has a monitoring station which is watching the house and who's coming in and out, and flies to Sana'a, Yemen, to Dubai, our United Arab Emirates, on his way to Malaysia, where he stays at a hotel with Nawaf al-Hazmi. Agents from 8 CIA offices, as well as 6 foreign intelligence services, are all asked to track him in the hopes that he will lead them to bigger Al-Qaeda figures, hopefully. Now, the CIA and local authorities are running an operation to track militants transitioning from Dubai Airport, and United Arab Emirates officials secretly make copies of his passport as he is passing through it, which is actually coming from 2 stories. One is that when he lands, the passport is photographed, or that when they stay at a hotel, the CIA breaks in and take photographs of the passport while they leave. Whatever story you believe is irrelevant, because what's important is that information about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi's passports, as well as them possessing dual U.S. visas, are sent to a CIA virtual station called the Bin Laden Issue Station, codenamed Malik Station. Now, when this information is passed to Alex Station, the FBI's counterterrorism agent, Doug Miller, who's on loan to Alex Station, as well as Mark Rossini, come across the cable of Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi. Miller drafts the cable, but needs permission from the CIA to share that with the FBI, in which they deliberately prevent the FBI to share this information. The deputy chief of Alex Station is Tom Wilshire, and he denies the cable to be shared with FBI headquarters. Thus, the CIA is intentionally withholding information from Khalid al-Mihdhar, from the FBI, about 2 Al-Qaeda operatives, in which the CIA also finds out that both men had traveled to the Balkans to fight against the Soviets, as well as being involved indirectly with the 1998 East Africa bombings and the USS Cole bombing. On January 5th of 2000, the Malaysian summit meeting is held. Now, this summit meeting is held for 3 days, between January 5th to January 8th. The meeting, which is held about a dozen, I'd say 12 or 13, trusted followers of Al-Qaeda and their affiliates, specifically Jemaah Islamiyah, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliate in Indonesia, where Malaysian authorities, acting on behalf of the CIA, have begun taking photographs of individuals who were there. And the individuals who attended are reported as follows: Nawaf al-Hazmi, Khalid al-Mihdhar, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Khalid bin Atash, Abid al-Rahim al-Nashiri, Ridwan Isamuddin, also known as Hambali, Ramzi bin al-Shib, and Fahad al-Kuso. The meeting was held in a condominium owned by Yazid Sufat, an Indonesian businessman who is also affiliated with Jemaah Islamiyah. The Malaysian Secret Service monitors the summit for 3 days and passes this information. The CIA and FBI will later miss many opportunities to foil this plot due to the fact that the CIA had their own agenda. They wanted to know what was happening at this meeting and wanted to know who was participating in it. Meanwhile, the NSA, who was listening in to the phone calls in Yemen, as well as Nawaf al-Hazmi's cell phone, had amassed an enormous amount of data. Now, what was being said on these lines? I can only speculate, but if we're dealing with terrorists, serious men who want to engage in illegal activities, you can only imagine that they were talking about operations, terrorist operations. And so you're probably asking yourself, well, why if the NSA had been listening to these intercepts, why was this not shared to prevent these incidents from even happening? And this is a question that I've been begging the 9/11 Truth Movement and to anyone that just listens to ask, because these are the important questions to ask. The questions are about pertinent pre-intelligence prior to an event even happening. And this is the reason why I'm bringing up the NSA and the CIA in particular. I'm not talking about the Saudis or the Israelis because that comes much later. I'm talking about years prior to these events. Now, I can't specify how important this is about the implication I'm going to make, and it's a very daring declaration, is that I'm in the firm belief, and I can make, like I said before, I can make a really strong argument that the NSA and the CIA, but more importantly, the NSA, had heard about 9/11, the USS Cole bombing, and maybe even the 1998 East Africa bombings being talked about on these phones. And if you have people like Osama bin Laden, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Al-Qaeda military chief Mohammed Atef, Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, we're talking on these phones. Everybody who is listening to me now, what do you think they were talking about? Now, the CIA already knows many details about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. The CIA also knows about a person named Mukhtar, who is referred to as KSM. He is also known as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Now, U.S. intelligence, specifically the CIA, and very few people in the FBI, one such person, Frank Pellegrino, out of New York, counterterrorism, knows the name Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. The reason why Pellegrino knows is because during their investigation in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, he found a wire transfer from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to Mohammed Salameh, which was in the tune of $2,500. The U.S. knows KSM as an Islamic militant since the exposure of also Operation Bajinka in January of 1995. And the CIA knows what he looks like. The FBI does not. Now, U.S. officials have stated that they only realized about the importance of the summit in the summer of 2001, but the presence of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed should have proved its importance. And this just goes to show you that the CIA at the highest levels, that the NSA at the highest levels had information regarding a meeting in Malaysia that two individuals who were involved with previous terrorist events that were coming to the United States, and this was intentionally withheld, not just from the FBI, but also from the Department of State, the highest officials in American government. So that would also mean that even some people in the Bush White House weren't told. So that just only proves also that even with the federal government, some people may not even realize what was happening, even though another part of their own government is acting in accordance opposite of their own. Now, although the CIA will go on to say that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed summit meeting is disputed, one counterterrorism expert will later testify anonymously. His identity was hidden before the 9/11 Commission in 2003, that he had access to transcripts of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's interrogation since his capture, and that other Al-Qaeda members, as well as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, had admitted to being at the summit. Malaysian authorities also specified that he was at this meeting, although there are no known pictures that we know of that were taken while he was there. Now, many other media reports also identify him there, and that is reported by the Canadian broadcasting company, CNN, and The Independent, which is a British tabloid. Now, between January 5th and 8th at this meeting, a series of calls are made by Al-Qaeda operatives. And of course, some of them are under surveillance by the Malaysian special branch and the CIA, which they link 3 sites involved in the bombing of the USS Cole. Even though the CIA is aware of these calls, it would later say it is unable to know what was on those calls. Now, when Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi left the meeting, they traveled to Bangkok, Thailand. The CIA's counterterrorism unit, as well as Alex Station, which is run by Richard Blee at this time, will later go to a principals meeting at the White House and state that they lost Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, that they could not find them. However, the NSA, who is monitoring Nawaf al-Hazmi's cell phone, does not. They knew, but they never told anybody. Now, the calls made by the operatives are between the following 3 locations. This is important. A payphone in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, near the apartment of the meeting. A Washington hotel in Bangkok, Thailand, in which Al-Qaeda operatives Ibrahim al-Dawar and Fahad al-Quso, who were involved with the USS Cole bombing, are staying at the hotel around this time. They're later joined at the hotel by Nawaf al-Hazmi, Khalid al-Mihdhar, and Tawfiq bin Attash, and also Fahad al-Quso's house in Yemen, in which the call came from a payphone to this location, which are made by Tawfiq bin Attash. Now, why do I point this out? Because it's huge. Because the transcripts of these calls are being heard. The monitoring of these people are known to the CIA. None of this information is also shared, neither shared with the FBI or the State Department. As you can see, just by this specific meeting, how much metadata was being collected by the CIA and NSA alone. And when I started this talk, you could just imagine how much information the NSA had, as well as the CIA, regarding the early signals, transcripts, and intercepts of bin Laden's satellite phone and the house in Yemen. That goes back years. On January 6, 2000, FBI Director Louis Freeh and other top FBI officials are indeed briefed about the meeting in Malaysia. However, because photographs are not shared with them and because the intercepts are not shared with them, they make a makeshift board in their office and pin old pictures of Al-Qaeda operatives. In other words, old-fashioned investigation. They are told that the CIA is in the lead about the meeting in Malaysia, as well as the monitoring of the house in Yemen. And the CIA, of course, promises to let the FBI know if there's an angle to the case or if there's any future developments, but they never tell them anything important. And this is a repetitive history regarding the CIA and the FBI. And one FBI official familiar with the case will later complained that the CIA purposely hid Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi from the FBI, that they purposely refused to tell the Bureau because they didn't want the FBI's counterterrorism leader, John O'Neill, and the FBI running over their case. And that's why September 11th happened. Jack Clunan, an FBI agent in the I-49 squad, which is created by John O'Neill, that focuses on Al-Qaeda, will later state, quote, if that information got disseminated, would it have had an impact on the events of 9/11? I'm telling you that it would have, end quote. Now here we are. We have prima facie evidence that the NSA and the CIA intentionally withheld information from the FBI as well as the leading officials in the State Department regarding two Al-Qaeda operatives, as well as what was being known at the Al-Qaeda communications hub in Yemen. Now, two operatives who attended the Al-Qaeda summit make short trips to neighboring countries, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. They go to Thailand and Singapore. But not much is known about why they were going there and what they were doing, because whatever the NSA and CIA had, they never shared. And so either the information is classified or that they hoarded the information and that we don't know much about the details. Now, presumably, therefore, it is stated that Tawfiq bin Attash does indeed travel to Thailand and that Nawaf al-Hazmi goes to Singapore. Now, according to the 9/11 Commission, they will later say that of these two trips, that, and I'll read you the quote, which is on page 4 of the 9/11 Commission. I'm sorry, part 4, chapter 4. Presumably, I'll read you the quote. After the fact, efforts were made to track them. U.S. officials in Kuala Lumpur wondered if one of these Arabs was still the mysterious Nawaf. Both returned to Kuala Lumpur within the next 24 hours, though the authorities did not know it at this time, end quote. Now, by January 9th, all the data and the photos that the Malaysians collected, all of it is now in the hands of the CIA, except for video footage that was taken. Now, not many people know about this. The Malaysian authorities, it is alleged that they took video footage of this meeting. Now, this is disputed, of course, by the CIA, because if they have it, they didn't share it. But it is alleged that there's video footage that was taken. Now, according to the Malaysian authorities, this video footage was sent to the CIA. But like I said, the videos and photos and very few details from this meeting has been publicly released. Now, what is known is that there are photos of the following. A photo of Khalid bin Attash with Khalid al-Mihdhar. A photo of Fahad al-Quso next to Khalid al-Mihdhar. There are numerous photos of Ramzi bin al-Shib. There is 2 photos of Ridwan Isamuddin and a photo of Yazid Sufat, who is recognized by Malaysian authorities. Now, what happens immediately after here? Now, when Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi entered the United States on January 15th of 2000, the NSA and the CIA knew that 2 Al-Qaeda operatives have entered the United States. This is FBI jurisdiction. The CIA, by law, cannot conduct operations inside the United States. Now, this comes from the Church Committee hearings in 1977, 76, 77, that basically handcuffed the CIA regarding assassination plots and illegal black operations happening in the United States. Not to say that the CIA doesn't operate, but they do covertly, but by law, they're not allowed to. This is the reason why the CIA never shared any information with the FBI regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Now, you can sit there and state, well, the CIA wanted this to happen. They wanted 9/11 to happen. That in order for this to be successful, they can't share this information because they fear that another agency that they can't control may monitor Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi and maybe arrest them. Now, that would be a very bold declaration. I'm not going to say that, although I guess I could make an argument for it. But it's not about what the CIA wants, but that's coming from more influential, powerful figures in the Bush White House and as well as officials in the Gulf and Israel regarding foreign policy guidelines. I will say that the CIA definitely, not the whole agency, but some of the highest officials in the CIA either allowed these attacks to happen because it benefited certain aspects of the federal government as well as their foreign interests. But I wouldn't say they manufactured it because there's no evidence to suggest that. Now, you don't need the United States to manufacture 9/11 or any other terrorist incident if you have terrorists who are willing to do the job. In other words, if you have an enemy that's willing to do the dirty work for you, and you can basically take advantage of the after effects, well, why would you get your hands dirty when you don't have to? You can just basically facilitate these attacks by not sharing information which could impede on these attacks, if that makes sense to you. So when Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi are inside the United States, the CIA for 16 months, and that would mean the NSA as well, the CIA at least for 16 months withheld this information from the FBI and the State Department until late August of 2001, when they finally told the leading principals of the federal government at a principals meeting in the White House that there were 2 Al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States, but they never even mentioned their full names or that they had U.S. visas. Even still, just weeks before the attacks, they still didn't share this information. Now, throughout the year 2001, the CIA had been phishing the FBI for information. It is asserted that in June of 2001, a CIA analyst from the Counterterrorism Office, an individual by the name of Clark Shannon, went to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., produced photos that were taken at the Malaysia summit meeting and showed them to an FBI counterterrorism officer by the name of Steve Bongard and Dina Corsi, who did not know who were in these pictures. A second meeting was held in July 2001, in which Clark Shannon finally tells Steve Bongard that the individual in this photo is Khalid al-Mihdhar. But still, he doesn't tell them that they had U.S. visas. Still, he doesn't tell them they're inside the United States. And what's important is what Clark Shannon told Steve Bongard and Dina Corsi. And what he told them was the following. When Steve Bongard was shown these photographs, he asked, who are these people and why are you following them? And according to the Joint House Inquiry Report, in a closed-door session with Clark Shannon told them that he was not allowed to share that information with the FBI, and that order came from Director George Tenet. Later, when George Tenet was interviewed by the Joint House Inquiry, and I made a specific podcast about this because this is the essence of pre-intelligence 9/11. The most important inquiry of all is Carl Levin interviewing George Tenet, in which George Tenet lied on the stand and said that he did not tell Clark Shannon this. So basically, there was two stories being told, one by Clark Shannon, one by George Tenet. And if that wasn't enough, another piece of important information that is largely ignored by the 9/11 Truth Movement, as well as the public, and I don't blame the public because they don't know, that throughout the year 2000, the CIA, and this is coming from George Tenet, the director, who testified at the Joint House Inquiry, would later tell Carl Levin, a panelist at the Joint House, that the reason why that information was not shared with the FBI regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Hazmi possessing dual U.S. visas was because nobody read that cable. According to Tenet, it was an information-only cable, and he knows nobody read that cable. The horrifying reality was over 50 agents in the counterterrorism unit at the CIA had read that cable. Specifically who read that cable, we don't know. But we do know two of them. Tom Wilshire, the deputy chief of Alex Station, and Michelle Land Casey, a CIA counterintelligence officer who is heading the Yemen hub operation. This is huge. What I am telling you is not a conspiracy. It's not a fringe conspiracy. It's not made out of fantasy. This is for the historical record. And I cannot tell you how important this is, because here we have many people in the counterintelligence agency, counterterrorism unit, who had known that two Al-Qaeda operatives were inside the United States and that nothing was shared with the FBI and the State Department, which in essence, if they had shared it, if the NSA had shared their intercepts, if the CIA had shared their physical information as well as signals intelligence, 9/11 could have been prevented. That's not me saying it. For example, former senior executive Thomas Drake of the NSA, who is the most important whistleblower since Daniel Ellsberg, basically said in many interviews over the years that the NSA had collected so much metadata, so much information, had intercepted so many phone calls, that they alone could have stopped September 11, 2001 from even happening. Just the agency alone. Not even talking about the CIA, just them alone. Not talking about the Saudis and Israelis and what they collected inside the United States, just the NSA alone. According to Michael Scheuer, the former chief of station of Alex Station from 1996 to 1999, he even admits that the NSA was the gold standard of information pre-intelligence of 9/11. No agency on the face of the earth had more information than them regarding Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. This meeting in Malaysia allowed for the USS Cole bombing to be successful, as well as September 11th, 2001. Even though the NSA and the CIA had collected human and signals intelligence of the major players involved with both, probably could have stopped both. And I think it's imperative that in the future, as well as the present, that we go back and reclaim 9/11 truth to concentrate on these issues. I don't care what happened at World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7, whether they collapsed by bombs or incendiary devices, or even Judy Wood space beams. We don't have any suspects. We don't have names yet. But what we have right now, what I just elucidated to you tonight, we have names, we have details, and we have CIA officers, specifically Tom Wilshire, Michelle Ann Casey, who intentionally withheld information which could have prevented 9/11. We have George Tenet, who perjured himself, who lied at the Joint House inquiry. Tom Wilshire and the head of the counterterrorism unit at the CIA, Cofer Black, also gave testimony and were interviewed by the Joint House and gave conflicting testimonies from each other. Later, one such CIA counterterrorism official, Alfreda M. Bukowski, who was one of the very first hires for Alex Station, gave closed-door testimony to the 9/11 Commission and stated that she herself had walked over to the FBI and gave information about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi and their passports. And when it was related to her by the 9/11 Commission that there is no record of her having ever entered the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., she then would continue her lies and state that she walked it over herself. How much more do you need to show regarding an inside job, and I hate that term, that there was a crime committed here, and that is the intentional withholding of information which could have prevented the USS Cole bombing, the 1998 East Africa bombings, and the 9/11 attacks. And from here, I'll take questions if you wish to ask questions. Just raise your hand and I'll try to answer your question as best I can. Or if not, I can end this short talk. And okay, I got one person who wishes to speak. Come on up.
Hey, Adam, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Good evening.
Good evening, my friend. First of all, I just want to say I've been watching your stuff for over the past, I want to say, year or so. It's been very interesting content, so I just want to thank you for the work that you've been putting in. It's been awesome, learning a lot of stuff from your content. Big fan of that. I had a couple questions, and just a couple things I wanted to bring up. Um, Specifically in regards to the Hamburg cell. I know you didn't touch on it too much on this, but I've been meaning to ask you, so I'm here. But um, specifically with Ziad Jarrah, Ziad Jarrah, like from what I can tell, your hypothesis is that this gentleman was not on the plane. Um, Whether he was an Israeli mole or whatever, it's possible, but speculation. I understand that. But your kind of hypothesis is that he was not on the plane. But one thing that I can't seem to shake is the fact that his voice on the, I guess the cockpit recorder, um, seems like it's him, and seems like it could not be him. I don't know, because I think the other guy you mentioned, Saeed Ghamdi, was spoke English decently, but wouldn't that be easily verifiable in terms of people that have known him? I would say, hey, this is his voice, and if it is his voice, which I'm sure obviously you've thought about that, what makes you still think that this guy was not the pilot? Sorry, I know it's not directly related to what you were just talking about, but I've been dying to ask you. So, what do you think about that?
Sure. No, I mean, like I said, I don't like to sidestep the questions anyway. But yes, I do make a hypothesis regarding Ziad Al Jarrah, regarding that he may not have been on United Airlines Flight 93, which crashed into Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And the reason why I say this is because we have at least 6 phone calls that were made on the plane that state there were only 3 hijackers on board this plane, where it is alleged that there were 4. Yes, his family does have a history of being Israeli intelligence assets, including his uncle and cousin, Ali Al Jarrah, Asim Al Jarrah, and Joseph Al Jarrah. But that does not necessarily mean that Ziad Jarrah is also an Israeli asset. I do speculate. I make that do clear that you took care to mention. Yes, this is the reason why I don't dismiss him being on the plane. Is the mere and simple fact that his voice is on the cockpit call into the cabin, and there were 2 calls. There were 2 voice radio declarations made on the plane, and this is verified from the Florida flight school that he went to, where the FBI interviewed people who knew Ziad Jarrah and said, yes, that is his voice. So we do know that's his voice. And because of this, yes, I do not state with any real conviction that he wasn't on the plane. It's the only thing that is keeping me from saying he wasn't on the plane. But there is a very unclear hypothesis that I was made aware by DJ Thermal Detonator about a year ago, in which he found an article that there are individuals who were, I think, in Boston, I want to say, or in New Jersey, one of those states, that were in possession of radio transmitting devices that you can buy at these stores that were made for communications on the ground to airplanes. Now, these people were basically seen buying these devices in the days leading up to 9/11, and I will have to go back and find out more from DJ Thermodetonator, because it happened a year ago and my mind is shot. So please forgive me. But yeah, I do remember this, and that the individuals were somehow linked to Ziad Jarrah in a way. I can't remember, but we'll forget about that for now. But I do remember that being brought to my attention. But yes, you would be right that we can't say with any conviction that he wasn't on the plane because his voice is heard on the plane itself. Are there any more other questions for tonight? Oh yeah, go yeah. Come on up, Solid.
Hey Adam, thanks for that. Thanks for answering that. What are your thoughts on, I guess, some new media regarding 9/11, like films and TV shows? There was a pretty, I guess, interesting or funny coincidence. There was a film that was made recently. I think it was last year. It's pretty new. In Europe, I forgot the country. It may have been a Dutch film, but it was about Ziad Jarrah. Um, they don't name him directly, but I think the film was called Co-Pilot. It was pretty much the story of Ziad Jarrah, but from the perspective of his girlfriend, Hazel Sanguine, I think her name is. Um, but what was interesting was um, they had named Ziad Jarrah in the film Saeed, and I thought that was pretty funny. Like Saeed, like funny coincidence, or what's the term? Goose egg or whatever the term is. And there was an interesting scene in terms of the end. I watched the film. At the end of the movie, there's a scene where Hazel Sanguine is taken into or goes to the German authorities, and she gets a phone call from the Florida um, flight schools that Ziad Jarrah was going to, and they it's a pretty eerie scene because they ask she asks them, hey, have you seen Ziad, or I haven't seen him recently or whatever, and they ask the same thing to her, like, hey, have you seen him? And she says, have you heard from him? And she says, um, no, as if they didn't know that where he was. And then all of a sudden the voice says, he's no longer with us, and they hang up the phone. And that was from the flight school she was talking to, and it was a weird scene because I had remember reading some book some time ago about this. I'm not sure the credibility author, and I have to find it. Just the name of the book escapes me, but they were talking about Hazel Sanguine, about how it was kind of weird how she had. I think it was in the German authorities, their police report, how she had received this call. So the movie kind of played on that, and it was an eerie call where the people on the other line wanted to make sure almost that she spoke, whether she spoke to him or not. And once they confirmed that she hadn't, they said, "Oh yeah, he's dead." Um, and obviously, this is like the morning, the day after or the day of the attacks. So I thought that was pretty wild. I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up, but because you see in new media nowadays, I think there was another film, movie, or TV show that came out a couple of years ago, based on the book The Looming Tower. It's kind of like the neoliberal version of 9/11 Truth, where it's kind of like, oh, it was just what were you just talking about, intelligence and competence versus something more sinister. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up, and maybe if you had thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for bringing up that film Co-Pilot, which was made in 2021. I am familiar with it. I have not seen it myself, even though I do have it saved in my bookmarks. But I have like 1,000 bookmarks, and I can't keep up with everything. But yes, I do want to watch that film, and it seems it's very hard to get, and it basically encapsulates the relationship between Hazel Sanguine and Ziad Jarrah. Incidentally enough, I did speak with about Ziad Jarrah just the other day with a couple of co-researchers about a letter that he had written in the day prior to 9/11 to Asia Sanguine, and that this letter basically was kind of cryptic. If you haven't read it, I would suggest you read it. Ziad Jarrah's letter to Asia Sanguine, which is basically public, in which he basically tells her that he will see her in time, and that you won't be far away from me. But however, what's important is that the letter itself was mailed to a wrong address. Now, if you're going to write a final letter to the love of your life, you would make sure that the letter is going to the correct address. However, the letter was found out. It went back, returned to sender, and the FBI intercepted it and got the letter itself. As for films, boy, very few. I mean, this is another crime of 9/11 is that we don't have many good films about 9/11 itself. Probably a film called The Path to 9/11, which was a TV miniseries that starred Harvey Keitel in 2006 would be one. There was a French film. It was a two-part film called Roads to 9/11. I forgot I think it's either French or I think it's French. I'm not too sure, but there are very few. The Hamburg Cell by History Channel was pretty good. But yeah, it's unfortunate that the subject, which is actually maligned by the more fringe conspiracies, and also the patriotic narrative, if I could say, coming from the U.S. federal government, which aren't going to tell you the more important aspects and the actual anomalies regarding 9/11. There's also a TV series in 2017 called Road to 9/11 that starred F. Murray Abraham, and also Leon Panetta. And also, I think this was the film I was referring to. Yes, this is actually at Road to 9/11, which is a TV miniseries that was narrated by F. Murray Abraham. It was a three-part. That's right. It was a three-part documentary. And I think this was probably the best 9/11 docuseries of all, actually, in my opinion. Just look up Road to 9/11 2017, and I would recommend that, as well as also another film called Triple Cross, which is encapsulating Ali Muhammad, a triple agent, and also the book by Peter Lance. The documentary is called Triple Cross. You can find that on YouTube, which is actually really good, which leads up to the events of September 11, 2001. That's all I can actually refer to you, unfortunately. But if there are no more questions, I can end it tonight. And probably see you next week. Who knows? I do these Twitter spaces periodically, usually without warning, but whatever come across my mind. I'll give you one last time. Go ahead, Solid.
Yeah, Adam, listen, I really appreciate these Twitter spaces. They're really cool. It's my first time interacting. One thing I would say is I know your research. I'm impressed by your research on some of the kind of Islamic extremist movements. I'm a Muslim myself, so I can tell when somebody knows what the hell they're talking about because I've studied the history pretty well. So I think it's pretty good stuff. This was really interesting. So I appreciate you doing your thing. So. Just keep doing your content, and I'm gonna keep checking it out.
Oh no! Listen, thank you very much. Really, I'm learning as we go along, actually. And, my previous studies into monotheism helped me a little bit to study about Islam itself, Sunni and Shia, the ideology of Wahhabism, which I repeat ad nauseum is anti-ethical to Islam as a religion. I do make mention that the Islamic world as a whole condemns the actions of these terrorists, which are usually backed by the Western powers, the United States coalition, Israel, Saudi Arabia, which incidentally is currently at war with the Muslim community, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Algeria, Lebanon. We could sit here for the next 2 hours talking about the vast influence of the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, Israel's very powerful super PAC, the nefarious secrets of the Saudi lobby, which is the Gulf, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, which are behind the ideology that it permeates these groups, which in essence kill more Muslims than they do anybody else. But all you hear is about the unfortunate deaths of 3,000 people in the United States. But hey, listen, I can't thank you enough for the very kind adulations you share with me. But I will end it tonight, and I will do a better job of relating the Twitter Spaces again. And thank you very much for listening. Have a good night.